PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. I'm going to show you another game from the World Amateur Championship held on the Greek island of Kos in May. And this game was also awarded a Best Game prize by my Grandmaster colleague Spiridon Skembris. This was his choice. Just a reminder, these ACO events take place twice a year on Crete in October and on the Greek island of Kos in May. Beautiful hotels, friendly atmosphere, Grandmaster coaching and lectures. Just check out the ACO website. I'll put the link in the comments and in the video description as well. I highly recommend these events, and it's been a pleasure to meet some of the viewers of the channel in person at these tournaments and even play against some of them in a simul. So, on to the game. The winner of this game is Mauro Cascella, who lives in Milan, that wonderful city in northern Italy. In the previous game, we saw a classic Greek gift sacrifice, and this game also features a sack, but it's more positional. I really like this game. So, e4. I should say playing white is Norbert Frühauf. So Mauro Cascella playing black, and we're looking at it from black's viewpoint. So yeah, I'm not giving too much away when I say that black won this game. So it's a Caro-Kann, and Mauro plays this trendy variation with knight f6 and then e takes f6, which looks a little bit strange to damage black's pawn structure, as white has this very nice 4 against 3 majority on the queen side. But these pawns can give black's king excellent protection. It's a very interesting variation. c3, this is the sort of recommended way to play against this, because it puts the bishop on this nice square, and then queen c2 just causes a slight problem for black, because however this pawn is defended, then it creates a little bit of a chink in black's armour on the king side. But Mauro plays the line which is really trendy at the moment, this move h5. Now, a few years ago, this was never played, but with the advent of computer analysis, it was discovered that computers rather like this move h5. It's extraordinary. I mean, it makes a virtue out of the fact that this pawn needs defending and turns it into an attacking unit. It can sometimes advance to h4. I actually considered this position in one of my Patreon opening surveys a few months ago, about 6 months ago. And the line I recommended for white was this: castles, then knight f4, knight d7, and now a really strange move, queen d1, and the queen bounces out to either h5 or f3. And this has scored extremely well recently. It's worth investigating. But do become a patron, and you can check out that whole video. But here Norbert played bishop e3, and it seems to me that this is also a very logical continuation. You put the king on the queen side, and then potentially you can try and attack black's king, because this pawn has advanced possibly a little bit too early. But this has also been played quite a lot, and actually black is doing okay here. So anyway, knight f8 played. It's nice to put this king next, put the knight next to the king. It covers some important squares, makes the king a bit safer, and also means this bishop is ready for duty. So knight g3 played, and this is a really interesting moment in the game. So the pawn is attacked. Now if the pawn advances, then knight f5 is a bit annoying. You know, black has to give up this bishop, and that's quite a concession. I think g6 is probably the best move here. And then that knight can float back into play like this. It's an interesting position. But Mauro plays a really bold idea here. He completely ignores the threat to the pawn and just goes for it on the queen side. Now, this is really bold. I like this. Now, the question is, can white take that pawn on h5? Well, I think white can, but actually, in this case, white was taken in, declined the pawn sacrifice and just played the knight into e4. Just very quickly, let's have a look at what would happen after knight takes h5. Well, bishop g4 does not win material because bishop e2 actually saves everything. But there is an interesting idea. You could play bishop e6. Now, I'm not saying this is white's best, but what happens after king b1? Queen a5. Threatens the pawn. And after b3, you play b4. Attacking the knight on h5 and also the pawn on c3. Very interesting idea. So there's more to this than meets the eye. But anyway, white should definitely take that pawn. But instead, knight e4 played. Bishop e6. And actually, this is quite nice for black. Bishop is on a good diagonal, pointing down towards white's queen side, where the king is. It's not so important that white has won this dark squared bishop. This is the important one to retain because this is such a key diagonal. I think black's position is fully satisfactory because the king is completely safe, actually. It doesn't matter this pawn is on h5. Knight does a really good job of protecting the king. And those pawns, well, that's quite a barricade. King b1 played, and a5. Why not? Why not throw those pawns up the board? Black wants to crack open some lines. It's good. c4 played. Now, it looks weird to open up lines for black on the queen side. But actually, white has a big problem here. Okay, let me illustrate this. So, well, for example, if the rook moves, then this one could potentially be taken. So let's play h3. I mean, not such a daft move. But then let's see what black's idea is. Queen d5, threatening the pawn here. I mean, this is a very nice lineup. And after b3, then a4 with serious pressure on white's position. If b4, then it is actually possible to take that pawn. So actually c4, although it looks strange, actually white was already under serious pressure. And here Mauro plays a4. He's continuing pushing these pawns, looking to open lines, putting some pressure on white's king. I mean, you could play in another way here. You could play quite positionally. Just exchange and put the bishop on d5. And I like black's pieces here. Knight control over d5. Potentially the knight can come to e6 and, open b file. That's a very positional way of playing. This is sort of a classic good knight against bad bishop position, actually. But c4 also looks very attractive, pressing the king. And now this knight wants to join in the fun. The knight swings back. And, yeah, I mean, this knight could easily come into, after taking on c4, come into b6 and then d5. That looks really tasty. So white decided to confuse the issue. d5. Now, it could be taken, but Mauro comes up with a very interesting idea. First of all, bishop g4. And after rook d2, rook takes bishop on e3. It's very positional. And then knight c5. So it's given this knight a beautiful square on c5, looking over at these squares. Incidentally, if black wanted to do this straight away, this doesn't work because of this And then it's possible to take on b5 and exchange of queens. Not so good for black. So that's why Mauro sacked the exchange and then knight c5. And this is incredibly dangerous. Bishop h7 check. And then king b1, a very understandable move because there's potential to play knight b3. The computer wants to play pawn takes c6 here. But this looks incredibly scary. Still seems to me that black has a very interesting initiative. And, well, I mean, I won't go into huge depth there, but white has to find a series of only moves just to stay on the board. King b1 is a very human move. Now Mauro takes on c4. Looks very reasonable to open lines. I really like b4 here, though. Such a nice positional move. It secures the knight on c5. And there's potential to open up lines. It looks so nice for black. But pawn takes pawn, also a very understandable move. Just opening up lines. And then queen e5. So really going for it. I mean, white is under massive pressure in this position. One of the problems for white is that the queen has to keep hold of the bishop. You know, you want to be able to play queen c3 and offer a trade of queens, but no, simply not possible. h3 played, kicking the bishop back, and rook d1. I mean, this all looks very understandable, but actually, after this move, white is in trouble. That bishop is trapped. So, bishop takes, pawn takes bishop. Of course, if queen takes pawn, that's rather important. That check wins the queen. So actually, black is just material up now. So rook d8, an exchange, and this pawn really isn't going very far. And in the meantime, white's king is still in huge trouble here. And this is what happened. Bishop f5 check, king c1, knight d3. And now if the king moves, let's say king d2, queen e4, you can see these pieces are just offside and black's queen is coming in to decide the game. So after knight d3 check, rook takes, but of course this is just completely winning for black now. And the game ended like this. Important that the pawn can be stopped. And around about here, white resigned. White is, after all, a piece down. I thought it was a really nice game, and I think Mauro was rewarded for his boldness. So, you know, very interesting pawn sacrifice in the opening with b5. And then later on, you know, these very, you know, bold attacking moves with a4 and, you know, just ploughing on with these pawns. And, you know, even later on, you know, knight c5, just really active. And I think in the end, although if you look at this with a computer, you'll see that white's position theoretically is still okay. In practice, when you're under pressure, when your opponent is just going for it on every move, it's incredibly difficult to defend. And yeah, Mauro's courageous attacking play paid off. So congratulations. Nice game.